Are classic race cars like this 1965 911 that won Daytona an investment winner, or is it going to be a big old loser on BAT? Let's find out.
Get those words!
All right, you guys. Man, I need some caffeine. I had coffee this morning, but that was hours ago, and I'm trying to kick my my Coke Zero habit. Are they? I guess they're gonna make all that stuff illegal or something like that because supposedly cause tumors or something. I don't know. How you guys doing? You fired up? You ready for a brand new episode of the Bid Nerds? I know I kind of am. You, Michael Deeb, partner? What's up?
So fired up, dude. We've got a super cool car to do today, and it's just great we're doing the show, man. Look at this. We're still in the air. I think we are like, can I say, like 24 subscribers away from hitting 1,000, and then YouTube is going to be like, you Bid Nerds, we want to promote you, and we believe the algorithm is just going to just take off, and we're not going to know what to do with all the new subscribers and success that YouTube has in store for us when we hit 1,000 subscribers.
That's what's going to happen at 1,000, or absolutely nothing.
Or I just made all that up. Yeah,
right? It's going to take us another 10 years to get another 1,000.
Yeah.
Hey, we do it just because you know what? Look, we have a half dozen subscribers that are you guys. The core nerd herd just rocks it. We love you guys. And the early adopters. We just love doing the show. We do it anyway. We're doing this for fun, and because why not? We're not experts. We're idiots. And look, a lot of people are like, why would you? You know, it's impossible to be one of these YouTubers that you get all the subscribers and all the exciting stuff and stuff like that. Why would you try doing that? Why would you try being a rock star? Why would you try being an author or a writer or a movie maker? It's like, have you been to a bookstore? There's tons and tons and tons of mediocre books. You could be the mediocre writer. Quoting this, that's Michael Malice. That's his point. But it's true, right? I mean, come on.
John Lithgow's son in some movie wanted to be, he goes, I want to be a writer. And he goes, writer? He goes, they're like in Southern California, like from Thousand Oaks. And Lithgow's talking to his son, and his son, instead of going to university, wants to just be a writer. And they're like a wealthy family. He goes, you want to be a writer? And he goes, what are you going to write about? You're not oppressed? I can't remember what movie that was from, but it was such a good line. Lithgow telling his son, he's like, what do you have to say? Like, you're not oppressed. Like, you've got it easy. You're a white rich kid. Like,
you want to be an artist, you gotta have a bad time, right? It's like when comedians, when they get super, they come up and then it's like, they're great when they were hungry, and then their rent is paid and they're not funny anymore because they're not struggling. It's true. All right, so what do we do on the show? If you're new to the channel, thank you for checking us out. Bid Nerds is your daily nerd out on the most interesting car of the day from all the automotive enthusiast auction sites. My partner Michael Deeb and myself, John Polnik, we dig through all these sites and we find what we think is the most interesting car of the day. It may not be the most expensive or most rare, but for some reason or another, we think it's the most interesting, and that's the only thing that we are ever right about. Everything else on the show is typically we are just complete morons. What we do is when we have that conversation, then we make a prediction as what we think is going to happen with that car's auction. What will the results be? Then we marry our poor predictions with the actual results. We go into the future and we find out what happened with that car, and then we show you that we really don't know what we're talking about. But most of the people in our audience do. You guys can play along like The Price is Right and put your bid in and see if you're better at it than we are. Do it before we actually do the reveal, and it's kind of fun. So play along with us. Michael Deeb, you ready for the most interesting car of the day?
I am. I really like this car, but we are going to lean on the herd heavily to help us try to assess the value of this car because it's a former race car. Okay. So without further ado,
there is just a little bit more ado. We want to shout out to Garden Classic of Las Vegas for supporting the show. This is the kind of car that they would maybe Steve over there. Hopefully, he'll be able to help hook us up and give us some more deets on this car. All right, Michael Deeb.
It's definitely a car Godden would have represented while I was working there. I definitely would have tried to make a case for buying and selling this car. But, I oftentimes outkick my coverage. Anyways, without further ado, is this premium listing on Bring a Trailer. What we're looking at is a 1965 Porsche 911 Coupe that was raced in period in the Southeast region and has incredible provenance, having been a Daytona class winner in, and let me read it to you, 1967. So in 1967, this car raced at Daytona and won its class. This car also finished second at Daytona in 1969 and third at Sebring in 1969. I think those were this car's top three results. This car was sold new as a basic, can I say basic bitch 911 right off the showroom floor to Brumos Porsche in Jacksonville, Florida. The owner of this car was good friends with a racing driver, and the racing driver convinced the good doctor that bought this car that he should race it. So the two of them campaigned this car in the Southeast region, and the two of them finished first in class in 1967. So it's some interesting stuff here, JP, because this wasn't a factory race car, and this certainly wasn't a factory team car. This was just a 911 off the showroom floor that these guys prepared for racing. In order to do so, they massaged the 2-liter 911 motor. It's got a basic 901 gearbox. The car was fitted with Webers. What they did do was they grafted on a very subtle flare, a flare that's not even as big as a Carrera flare, to the rear, so that they could go staggered with on the 15-inch wheels. So the torque thrust wheels that are on this car, which are correct to what was on the car in period when it raced, are staggered with. They're wider in the rear, and you could just see, great photo, JP, that little grafted on flare to accommodate the wider rear wheel. They also then put in fixed back seats, which kind of look like the seats that would have come on a 356 Speedster, and then they put in a roll cage. This car was sold new in signal red and raced in period in this colorway. Several years ago, this car was refurbished and brought back to as it raced in period, with the decals and the paint and all the accoutrement, so that the car looks like it did when it raced in period. It's a really special car because of its provenance and because of its racing history. The Cardex is included in the sale. And then, of course, there's tons of records and tons of awards to accompany the vehicle. If you're looking for a cool car to go out and drive and you could afford it, this would be a great way to go. My concern, John, and we say this a lot about the really uber expensive, really special cars, is that oftentimes somebody buys them and then they're just parked in a museum or a collection, and they're only taken out to be shown on a lawn. I would love to see this car campaign in really cool driving and historic events. This is a car that should race in Monterey during Monterey Car Week. Or you could take this car to Europe and run it old Lord March's driveway at the Goodwood, that kind of thing. Or you could race it all over France in the Tour de France Auto, or take it on the Targa Florio retrospective. This would be a great car for something like that. But chances are, John, it's just going to wind up parked and somebody's just going to wipe it with a diaper, and that breaks my heart. Really neat car. It's a car that when I see the livery and you think about its history, I as a person who loves to drive, I would want to get behind the wheel of this thing. But we'll see what the value is going to be, and we'll see if the car winds up getting campaigned or just parked. So I send it back to you, JP. 1965 2-liter with a 901 gearbox. It's probably not even 150 horsepower, but this is a car that probably weighs close to 2,000 pounds. So it's pretty lightweight. This is a short wheelbase car. It's a really neat thing. What do you like about it, and what do you think is going to happen?
Remove fuel cap before opening hood. See that on here? I love that. Yeah. The current singers, that's kind of one of their things. They have that fuel cap in the middle of the hood. Yeah. I bet you don't have to remove that cap before you open it. On
a Singer, no.
It's just so fun to see something like that. And how many times did someone screw that up and actually pull it? Look at the size of that steering wheel. Could you imagine racing this car with that steering wheel, the big old wagon wheel? With all the mods that they did to this car in period, you'd think they would have gone with a smaller steering wheel of some sort in period, the roll bars and the seats and everything like that, but they kept yeah, it's that must have been one hell of a thing to hang on to, flying around corners. But yeah, this car is just so much fun. Race cars, look, a lot of serious collectors have realized that race cars with provenance are where it's at when it comes to getting and finding the most money, from an appreciative point of view. Adam Carolla is all about the race cars with
Yeah.
provenance. He has the biggest collection of Paul Newman race cars in the world, and it's like that's really where you see numbers get stupid and crazy. And hopefully, a car like this, I'm with you, Deeb. You hope that a collector that does buy this is someone like Adam who will race it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
If a guy like Adam bought this car, it would go hit Laguna Seca or wherever. It would absolutely be at Historics. But when it comes to predicting the value of a car like this you really start getting into the weeds here. And I don't even know where to begin. I could get, if it weren't a provenance race car, we could pretty easily put a number on it that I think would be fairly close.
Right.
Race car stuff, winning Daytona back in the '60s. I don't know. What do you think? So what's going to happen?
So there's a couple of schools of thought, and there are people that know way more about these than I, and so obviously with a grain of salt, we're going to try to guess where we think this car is going to come in. There's a lot to like here. This car has been brought back to its cosmetic and livery and equipment as it raced in, period. And I think that's where the true value is. So I'm glad that somebody did that. I love that this car was born in signal red, raced in signal red, and is today, can you imagine, John, almost 60 years later, presented in signal red with all the right stickers on it. So that's really, really cool. Couple things. This car is not a race car from Porsche. This was a road car sold at the dealership that somebody decided to take racing. If this car was built in Weissach and it was a factory or even a Porsche customer car that the Porsche racing department had built, I would say that this car with the provenance would have brought a lot more money. In that case, I would think that this car would be worth $750,000 or more. But since it's just a basic road car that somebody took racing, yet it still has incredible racing provenance with a class win at Daytona, someplace that Porsche has a long history with that track. So if it were a basic 65 911 in largely original condition or sort of restored to original condition from 1965, this would be, I think, about a $300,000 to $350,000 car. Our car is currently at $301,709 with about 2 days to close. So I'd say that this car is within 50 grand of its proper value. So now what we have to do is just attach to it what we think the racing history is worth. And again, based on nothing at all, I am just going to pull out of thin air that I think that this car is going to enjoy about $150,000 premium, or roughly a 50% premium for the provenance on top of it. If it were a factory race car, it'd be a totally different ball game. I think it would be close to $750,000 to $1 million. But I'm going to say $450,000, or about $100,000 to $150,000 in provenance over what a standard, like really good 65 911 should bring. So based on me just sort of making ish up, I'm going to say 150 grand over a standard value, or I'm just going to ballpark it at $450,000, JP, and send it back to you. Again, not a factory race car, not even a factory customer racing car, but a road car that was raced, but won and did really well for many years, because it was basically raced from the time it was new through the early 70s. But in 67 and particularly in 69, this car did really well. And it is now, because of that win, that class win, this car is a footnote in Porsche's racing history. But it was not born a Porsche racing car. So I'm going to go 150 for the Provenance and give it back to you, JP, at 450 grand. And again, I could be off by another 150,000. Who knows? So I send it to you, 450 grand. Do you think this is worth $500,000 or more, or you think I'm overshooting it and that it's only a $350,000 car?
Oh man, this is so out of my league in so many ways. Not just how much it's worth, but race cars are just not my. I love them. I love that this car exists, but I just don't. I have no idea where to put a number on this. Looking at how weird the economy is, you want to say, well, I don't know, man, or but this, I just don't see this as being disposable income in the normal sense. This is true investment grade money, and I think there's a lot of people that are looking to hedge bets. With inflation and all the different things that are going on, look, the economy, is there going to be a hard landing in the fourth quarter? Is it, or are we just kind of cruising for a soft landing? Is it the bottom going to drop out? Is there going to be a bunch of banking? Blah, 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 blah. There's all this, but you start talking about $500,000. This is real money, right? So I'm going to say $500,000. I normally, I'm pretty bearish in general, but I think the people that have money still have it, and they're looking for ways they're looking for safe harbors for their cash. And anyone that's sitting on large amounts of cash are probably a little bit more worried about the depreciation of money than they are the depreciation of cars. And this is the kind of thing that you could park a substantial amount of money on, and maybe it depreciates in the short term. Okay, but in the long run, this is absolutely something that's going to be worth something later because it does have provenance. So I'm going to say 500.
And JP, this car, it's at 300 now, right? This car could go to 600 grand, and I want everybody to know I wouldn't be surprised. It could be, because you cannot replicate provenance, and this car won Daytona as a Porsche.
This is a 65 911. Forget all that other stuff. It's still a 65. That's the first year of the 911. Yes, the 911 technically came out a year before that, but it was called the 901. You can look up that whole story. So this is the first actual 911 that was called the 911, and this one was raced and all this cool stuff. I mean, it's the first 911 for crying out loud. Man, what a cool car. But way the heck out of my league. All right, maybe someone who's watching isn't as much of a dirtbag as either one of us and actually knows something about this.
Tell us what you think.
See some predictions in the comments below. Let's hear some expertise. Maybe Adam Carolla can hop in. Maybe we'll get him on the other side of the break. Let me call him up. Let me call Adam and see what we can find out. Let's find out what happens with this car right after this. Hey guys, I gotta tell you about our friends Gaudin Porsche of Las Vegas and Gaudin Classic. If you're looking for a new Porsche or a classic, you gotta call our friend Steve at Gaudin. Save yourself the hassle of screwing around with all the auctions like we always talk about, and just talk to Steve. He'll find you the classic Porsche you're looking for. Gaudin Porsche of Las Vegas. Hey guys, welcome to the future. It is time for the second half of the Bid Nerds. Thanks for sticking around so long. You guys are awesome. We love the Nerd Herd. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers. Maybe by the time this episode goes on, we are at 1,000. So if we're at 1,000, then thank you. If not, what the heck, man? We are like a dozen subscribers away from there. It's going crazy.
Premature thankulation.
Can Deeb, I think we got to shout out the fact that there are a lot more people in the Nerd Herd than just Ross and Anthony, and a few other people. Nate N. We've got new subscribers all over the place. Bogdan Pennick, Empty Man, Sunday Drives, Chris Brunel. I'm just cruising through some of the recent comments from different names. Kevin Cody, of course, Ross and all those guys. Wade over at Tech Daily has been around, hanging out with us for a long time. Catching 45. Mike Oaki, let's see here. Rob Hendrickson is awesome. Robbie Ellie. Some of these I'm sure I'm butchering your names. Ryan Bernard, Jupiter's Garage, Ray Melville. We talk to him all the time. Podgy Bait, I don't know what that means, but it's freaking me out a little bit, and I'm glad that he's part of the Nerd Herd. John Taylor, you know, the list goes on and on and on, and we're going to go through and do some shout outs. And, you know, Michael Myers, of course, Buddha, one of our longtime fans from the very beginning. I think you were saying on the last episode that he wants to come and hang out and be part of the live version of the show that we're going to start doing when we get to 1,000. And I think we'll do a comments bit where we'll go through and read the comments from the Nerd Herd. We need more insults, honestly. I don't know how entertaining it'll be because people don't insult us enough. I think if we were to go through all the comments for the last year, if there are any, they're almost exclusively directed at me. I don't know what that means exactly.
It's either that guy or you guys, but it's I have if somebody called me out or lit me up, I missed it. I didn't, So.
Well, you never read the comments and you never go and hang out with a Nerd Herd, so
which is why I have a perfect record. Yeah, I can't get my feelings hurt if I don't read all the bad remarks.
All right. Well, again, thanks you guys so much for sticking around and thanks for subscribing. If you haven't done it already, please do so now. Maybe you'll be the 1,000th subscriber. And well, let's get to the car. What happened with this collector race car, man?
JP, sometimes what is it? It's sometimes better to be lucky than good or something. Is that how it goes? How does that cliche go? I don't know. Anyway,
I honestly don't know where you're going with that, but I'll let you go with it.
I went on a pretty long diatribe about this car as it is a racing, a former racing car and has won at Daytona and placed at Sebring and Daytona again in the late 60s in period. This 1965 Porsche 911 that is on Bring a Trailer. However, there's a couple of knocks. One, it's not a factory team car. It's not a factory customer car. It's a street car that was converted to racing in period. But then you add back for the fact that it won and placed over several years. This car was campaigned successfully with significantly historic results. So it's interesting to come to a conclusion on what the value of this car is. This car could be around a $300,000 car, could be a $400,000 car. And then I was saying add $100,000 or add, 50% for the racing provenance. And with all that in mind, because we were looking at it at around $300,000, I said, $450,000. Thinking this car could easily go up to $600,000-$700,000, but I didn't think so because it wasn't a factory. This car wasn't born in Wysock. This car came off the showroom floor at I think it was Brumos. So anyway, I gave $450,000. You took the over at $500,000, saying the people that can afford this car can still afford this car. So why not go a little bit higher? Well, JP, I was really close to a Yahtzee, all things considered, how much money had to be added onto this lot before the hammer closed. But our car did sell for $441,000, putting me $9,000 apart, or about 2% when you think about it. I'm pretty proud of that result because I actually think my logic made sense. If only to me, it still worked. It bore out. So therefore, I'm a genius and you're a nerd. 36 bids is what it took. I'm not surprised by the result. I'm just surprised that I was right. And maybe it wasn't because I'm good at this. Maybe it's because I was lucky.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it was a pretty good bid. I admitted before we went to the break that, I just don't know a whole lot about these. When you start getting into the collector thing and you start getting into the whole race car provenance, that is just so outside of my scope, right?
Me too. Yeah.
Well, I mean, but you know a lot more about it than I do. I mean, I've just never really followed any race circuits or any of that kind of stuff. Look, here's the thing, though. One of the things that I think is interesting about right now from an economic point of view, and the thing that I did mention before the break was that, the people that are buying this, or that I think the people that are looking at a car like this are looking at it as an investment. And if you look at about a year ago, that was probably top of the market for not just collector cars, but, just the market in general. Most capital allocators were saying, you know what, now's the time to sell. We don't know if there's going to be a hard landing or a soft landing or any of that kind of stuff. There was a lot of questions about what was going on, so a lot of people were getting out. So we saw that big dip, and there was definitely a dip here 6 months ago. That was probably the bottom, and we've been kind of bouncing along the bottom since then, particularly in these assets that are or that would be considered hedges against more traditional places to put your money, like the stock market and even crypto. That's not traditional at all, but you know, places that, you know, gold, whatever, precious metals, real estate, all of these assets that people had a lot of excess liquidity and were looking for places to guard against potential runaway inflation. We've seen interest rates obviously have gone way up, way up. And it looks like they're there to stay, but we haven't seen spending stop. So money is still being dumped into the system, and there has been a rip going on in the stock market. So I think a lot of capital allocators are sitting there going, well, crap, we missed out. We hedged, and now we missed out on this rip. Is there going to be another one? There's more money being put in the system. So are cap allocators going to be looking for more? Is there going to be a rip in classic cars and collectible cars like there was about call it a year and a half ago again, because people are pulling their money out of the hedges and going, okay, let's try to see if there's going to be a little bit of fire, a little bit of a bull market here, or is it just going to crash out at the last quarter of the year? And maybe it still does, but maybe we've got a quarter of a rip. I don't know. So what's going to happen in the next 3 months versus the next 6 months? If I were looking at a car like this, I would be looking at it long term. If you're going to buy something like this car now as a collector, you do it now. And then if you want to flip it, you get rid of it really quick, because I think this car could go up in the next couple of months, but I think by the last quarter, this goes back down, and it looks more of a kind of a long-term bear type investment. Does any of that stuff mean anything to you, or do you think I'm off?
No, I think you're right. Traditionally, Monterey Car Week, August, is middle of the third quarter, and it's the last bright spot for sort of the collector car market. And then I think things go quiet in the fourth quarter, at least in the car market, as people start to put cars away for the winter and things like that. And anybody wants to sell one, there's not a lot of people buying, so they usually give them away. There's good deals to be had heading into the winter. And you look at what convertibles do every fall, as far as values. Yeah. So I wouldn't contest anything that you just said. The question is the bigger picture, is that like, do we get another bright spot going into next year, or is it time to finally pay the bill? I don't have an opinion on that. I feel like, I don't know that I do a good job anticipating what's coming ahead. I feel, me personally, that I'm more reactionary than anything else,
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of reasons to have a pessimistic look at the economy, and look, you guys have all heard me kind of go on the rants about inflation and all that kind of stuff. With interest rates being so high relatively to the short term. I mean, and when I say short term, I mean the last 10 years, maybe even 20, really. Look, it's the interest rates long term need to stay high. I don't even think it'd be a bad thing if they went even higher. I know that could definitely cool the economy up, but the problem is that they're still spending. And until they get spending under control, which is never going to happen, I don't see that. I mean, there's a lot of people vying for control. We're not going to get into, presidential campaign type stuff, but I mean, let's be honest. Is there really any chance that anyone is going to get into a position of power that's going to say we're going to drastically, not just cut spending, but like get spending under control? Because politicians like to say, oh, we're cutting spending. Politicians will raise a budget on something, fill in the blank. I don't care whether, military or entitlements or whatever. They'll raise spending by $1 billion, let's say. And then the next year, instead of raising it by $1 billion, they'll raise it by 900 million. And then they'll say, see, we cut spending. No, it's still 900 million, $1 $1,900,000,000 more than you spent the previous year. You increase the increase less is not a cut. And that's what they're doing. That's what they're saying when they're talking about inflation right now, that it's being bandied about that inflation has been going down for 12 months in a row or 2 years in a row, right? It's like, well, wait a minute. No, it's still up from 2 years ago. It's just not up as much as it was before. So you're going to run around and say that it's been going down for 2 years. Find me a starting point and we can juke those numbers all over the place. So yeah, point, as I always say, is nobody's telling the truth, and everyone that's talking about this, most of the people that are talking about this kind of stuff, if they're an expert, they're trying to manipulate you. And we're clearly not experts. We're a couple of idiots. And even we're trying to manipulate you, I guess. I don't know. What do you guys think of the results of this classic race car, this car with a pedigree? Should it have brought more money? Is this result an illustration of a high number or a low number? What do you guys think in the comments below? Let us know.
And what do you think the future is for this, almost showroom stock 911 that went racing and won its class at Daytona at $450,000? Is that a good buy? Do you think this car is going to be worth twice as much in 10 years? I do, but I'm curious to know what you do.
Well, I mean, everything's going to be, technically everything in 10 years is going to be worth twice as much, because inflation will definitely double everything in 10 years. It just won't be worth as much. It'll just real dollars versus, adjusted for inflation versus actual value. Yeah. Watch some other episodes. We talk a lot about that kind of stuff. But let us know in the comments below what you think. And we'll be back tomorrow with another
interesting car
that we think is interesting.
Get those nerds!